also because we're out here in the woods and we love riding our bikes, but on the other hand, we gotta look out for nature lovers. People that go like, oh, motorcycles make so much noise and they're like dirty and they mess up the ground and tra-la. So we gotta figure out a solution. And the best we could come up with is a bike that doesn't make the noise, a bike that handles better than your average bike, and a bike that has a lot more fun factor, EA power. Now, in trying to do that, we tried to simplify the design as much as we could. Get rid of everything that is unnecessary. And you'd think on a motorcycle there are no unnecessary things. So what is more elementary than a motorcycle? I'll tell you what. Do you really need a gearbox? Well, you do if you got your regular engine, your 2-stroke or 4-stroke, which has the torque of a, I don't know, of an anteater. But you don't if you have an electric engine, an electric motor, they say. So you might not need a transmission because of maintenance, because of the weight factor, because of ratios that you might not feel really comfortable with. So you might want to have a motor in the wheel. Now this puppy right here, this is able to churn out 320 newton-meters of torque. 320, that's a lot, okay? That's like your 2-liter diesel automobile. That is about 10 times as much as on a regular motorcycle. And I don't think this is gonna just burn up rubber like crazy, because on a regular motorcycle like that may only have like 20-25 newton-meters of torque, but it's got the gearbox because it needs that gearbox to multiply the torque. So with its ratios, you get probably around the same figure. You know, you get like 250-300 newton-meters of torque at the rear wheel, minus losses, friction losses. Well, you don't hear. The motor is in the wheel, meaning no mechanical losses. So what you get at the wheel to be able to transfer, to put down to the ground, is what the motor produces, and that is it. There's no other loss, except for the heat, which is anyway a lot less than a regular engine. We came here, we're just out a few miles from the city, and you can probably hear that one cracking down as it's cooling down. Well, here, you can hold my hand on this. It's that efficient, okay? Almost every bit of current that comes from the battery to the motor is transferred into mechanical work. There's almost no loss. It's over 90% efficient. Now, you might say, okay, so we got one motor. Does it handle as good? Does it feel as good as your average bike? Well, to feel even better, we added a second motor in the front wheel. Now, normally, this you can switch on and off. I keep it on all the time because you don't like, when you ride on ground like this, when it's level and dry and everything, you don't really feel it, you know, contributing. Of course, it is contributing, but you don't feel anything special. But when it gets down to the nitty-gritty, when it gets muddy and dusty and sandy and everything, then you feel it. Like when you're in a corner leaning in and you twist on that throttle, you can feel it get up and go. You can feel it turning in. Besides, when you really stick it into a mud pull, you really feel then the front wheel contributing. You really feel that it's pulling along. What's really funny, when you climb a steep incline with the front wheel on, then your real wheel stops fishtailing around. You just climb in a straight line because it doesn't have to push all the way to the bike up. This is helping as well, and it's pulling the bike, so it just stays level, it just stays straight. It's just great. Okay, for riders like me. Okay, I'm not your stunt rider. I'm just a regular guy. The second reason why we opted for in-wheel, for hub motors, the way they call it, is so we could make the most space available for the battery. Now, battery you see here is 5.2 kilowatt hours. It can store 5.2 kilowatt hours of energy. That is the same that the BMW i8 has. The same capacity. It's not the same battery, but it is the same capacity. And the BMW i8 can pull 35 kilometers on one load, on one charge. This we estimate in regular conditions with, you know, having fun driving, we can probably pull like 55, 60, and that's, you know, really going for it. If you go conservatively, it could be 70, 80. Now this, mind you, this is a test bed. Okay, it's not the final product, hence all the wires and all the unfinished surfaces. The final test product will have about 10 kilowatt hours, so double that capacity, which can pull you easily 100 kilometers in off-road terrain. It's got a lot of nice stuff, so why don't we finish the intro here and get on to some riding. Mind you, it's been raining for the past week here, and I'm afraid we won't fare that good with our street tires once we hit the mud. I guess that's when we put another feature to the test, because this bike can do more than just roll forward, you know? As excited about riding as we were, it turns out we were right about the mud. May not look like much on your TV screen, but from where I'm standing, it's pretty soft and moist. And considering the street tires we have on, it just doesn't make any sense to slip and struggle. So we're gonna turn around. But check this out. Have you seen this on your regular bike? Reversing on a motorcycle. I'm taking it really easy since it's the first time I'm doing this. Huh? Normally with the regular bike it's push and pull all the way until you can swing it around, but not here. That's it. And this is how it works. By default, both motors spin forward as they respond to throttle input. Now, you flick a switch and they will run backwards. And there's no other mechanical linkage required. And as soon as you're on the right track, just flick that switch again and you're ready to roll forward. Here's another example where backing up can really come in handy. Like take this narrow rut, but there's just no room to turn away. Switch it to reverse, just gently work your way out. Now, I don't know about you, but to me, this is one of the finer things in life. Just roam in silence, enjoy the view. And this bike gets there. Now we've switched. My dad is riding electric, so I can use my helmet cam and get some footage of the bike in its natural habitat. Are still on the stiff side, rideable, but rather stiff. want to talk to you a little about suspension. You might notice the way we've designed this, and we've built it. This is a Hossack type suspension. It's what BMW likes to call the dual lever. I call it by its real name, Hossack. You have a rigid fork, and you have two swing arms, also rigid. And the lower one is connected to the frame via the shock absorber. Now you might say, ooh, you know, that is uglier than a dog's bottom. But cats dig it. Let's take a look at your regular telescopic fork for a minute. You already know this picture. What is though the drawback with telescopic forks? They dive under braking, for one. When you apply the brakes, all the mass transfer from the motorcycle goes up here to the headstock, onto the fork, and down to the wheel. Because that weight transfer needs to be taken over by the ground, needs to be transferred into the ground. And the only way for the suspension to accomplish this is by compressing. Because as soon as you apply pressure from upwards, the suspension will compress. When you do that downhill on a bumpy road, the suspension will compress and compress and compress and not have time to rebound. And you bottom out. Plus you lose a lot of braking efficiency when you do that. With this, the mass is being transferred naturally via the swing arms. There's no other way. It goes into the fork, onto the wheel. Now these are rigid, they cannot compress. And by adjusting the positioning of the shock absorber, you can dial it in such that actually even under the hardest of braking you will not have any dive. Actually you might even dial the suspension so that you might squat on the braking, but you don't necessarily want to do that. The other thing is that this whole assembly weighs a lot less than your regular suspension, because this is just a few chromoly piping, or you could do it out of aluminum or whatever. And also for us manufacturers it is important, because instead of two long 1 meter long shocks, you only have one small one, and all the rest is parts that you can easily manufacture. Also, an added bonus is the stiffness, the rigidity of it. To achieve the same rigidity that you get out of this structure with a telescopic fork, you need 50-60 millimeter piping, and that is expensive, that adds weight, that adds complexity to the whole thing, translates into cost. And now for the rear suspension, when you have a hub motor, this hub motor freewheels on the axle, meaning if you accelerate, the motor itself will just tend to spin backwards. So you need to take that torque, that spinning torque, and transfer it onto the chassis, so that the wheel actually spins forward the way you want it to. So then you have this component right here attached to the motor, and you'd want to transfer the torque back into the frame. Now it is important that you don't transfer it back into the swing arm, because that will create a host of unnecessary effects. You want to transfer it back into the frame, and the geometry of this is such that it prevents wheel hop. Like when you brake, especially when you go downhill and you brake or you apply regen, the wheel shouldn't be hopping, shouldn't be leaving the ground. This is what the BMW calls Paralever. It's two levers, not really parallel, but pretty much close to that. Here we are on the outskirts of my hometown, working our way on the back roads. to waste any more time and head for the mountains. And thanks to the magic of television, we're already here. Now, I've been here yesterday too, and let me tell you, these corners are really, really tricky. It's gravel over sand, and it makes for one hell of a slip if you don't pay attention. The region is actually strong enough that it could lock up the rear wheel. I can feel the bike fishtailing a bit now. It is really sandy down here, really loose soil. So a nice thing about it is that you can dial in a certain amount of regen, which kicks in all the time, every single time you go off the throttle. So that kind of mimics the engine braking, and you can set that to the amount you consider appropriate. And on top of that, you can vary the regen with the brake lever. Yeah, it's time for some smooth tarmac. Guess that was about all the camera shake one can handle. Smooth sailing from here on. We're only doing about 80 kilometers an hour now. As both motors are set up for maximum torque at low speed. Higher speeds are doable easily, and it all depends on your controller configuration.
emotions for you is a feeling you can describe into words. Don't look at me with ghost eyes. Ask ghosts like a black hole, the black hole in you. Don't tell me how strong you are when emotions for you is a feeling you can describe into words. Don't look at me with ghost eyes. Ask ghosts like a black hole, the black hole